Welcome to Invest in Part 1. I'm delighted to be here with you. My name is Mentor Ate, and I want to welcome you to today's session. We're beginning what I consider to be perhaps a 2-week session, and for the next 2 weeks I'm going to teach about investing. But more importantly, I'm going to show how anyone, irrespective of where you are right now in life, irrespective of what you have or what you do not have, I'm going to show how you can start your investment journey. To begin today's session, let me just perhaps start with a few fundamental thoughts, ideas, and principles before we start talking about investing. See, investing in itself is like a game, but it's an intellectual game. It's not emotional. In other words, to be a good investor, you have to have wisdom. You have to have good financial understanding. You have to be good at analyzing opportunities and making a decision. Now, you don't have to be an analyst. Let me make that very clear. You don't have to be an analyst, but you must have somewhat of an analytical mind. One of the best things I've found with investing is recognizing that it's a team sport. In other words, if you want to be very good at investing, you must have people around you to support your decisions. The best athletes, if you've ever watched Tiger Woods play golf and observed his game, what you find is that he has a number of people around him. He has various coaches, a swing coach, putting coach, physical coach. He has people around him that stand back and watch him. Part of the reason is because when Tiger Woods is swinging, he can't see himself. You see, if you imagine this to be a painting on a wall, and you, as the painting, if you're fixed on the wall, you can't see yourself. You need someone like a Picasso to stand back and observe what you've painted and perhaps provide you with some advice. And so, investing is a team sport, but it's also an intellectual sport. You're going to have to use your intellect. And at the foundation to starting any investment journey, the first thing I'm going to start with is what I consider to be the most important thing. And that comes in 3 letters. You. You see, the investor makes the investment worthwhile. Most people think investing and they perhaps have an idea about stocks and bonds and options. Investing is not about the plan in itself. It's not about the product. It's not about the vehicle. It's not about options. It's about the investor. The investor makes the investment successful. And I'm going to share with you over the course of a few days some of the strategies you're going to need to invest, some of the vehicles you're going to consider to invest with. But I think the best lesson I'm going to perhaps share with you is how to develop the skill set, the mindset, the emotional capacity, but more than anything, the wisdom needed to invest. Investing begins with an idea. It begins with an idea. That idea can be your idea, or it could be an idea that is out there that you simply find a way to improve on. So I want to start by saying this. To begin your journey towards becoming a good investor, you've got to start with the basics. Now, what are the basics? The basics begins with understanding wealth, because the purpose of investing is to multiply your returns, is to increase what you have. If a farmer wants to teach perhaps his son or perhaps his students how to create a harvest, the farmer doesn't start by talking about the harvest. The farmer must begin by explaining how to sow a seed. So we cannot start with the effect. We must go back to the causes. Most people are thinking about effects. We must begin with the causes. We must go back to the basics and ask ourselves, how do we sow the seed? But more importantly, How do we find the soil? Because what you need is seed, you need soil, you need supply, and by combining seed, soil, and supply, what you find is that you're able to now create a harvest. But you begin with a seed. Now you are a seed. So we're going to try and improve your financial education over the next few days so that you're able to make the right decisions. You see, one of the biggest reasons why most people make terrible financial decisions or get to the end of their lives and realize that they have nothing to show for it is simply because they delegated their financial decisions to other people. They were basing their decisions on other people's opinions, and they were trusting the so-called experts, which I think is a tragedy. The great writer says, "My people perish for lack of wisdom, for lack of knowledge." They just don't know. You must begin with wisdom. And part of the reason you start with wisdom is because, you see, all of us, over the course of our life, we're going to use money. And we're all going to play the game of money. As a matter of fact, we're all playing the game of money. The problem is, very few recognize that they're playing the game of money, and very few know the rules of the game. As a result of that, most people are amateurs playing against professionals. I did that for so many years. I did that for so long, and for that reason, I always lost. And it wasn't until I started to learn the rules of the game that I was able to play. Now, one of the rules of the game is you got to understand the vocabulary of wealth, the vocabulary of investing, the vocabulary of money. That's where you start. Now, imagine this. If you've ever traveled to a different destination, let's say you've traveled abroad to a different country, a foreign speaking country that is not your mother tongue. Let's say you're American, for example, and you fly to Paris and you can't speak French. Now, your experience of Paris will be limited because you can't communicate. Likewise, if the people you interact with don't understand English, then they can't communicate with you. So the first part of the journey is understanding vocabulary, increasing your wisdom, and that increase is a choice. It's something that improves with time, but more importantly, improves with study, the deliberate decision to study. So, in starting the investment journey, we're going to begin with a few basic definitions of some terms, just to guide you. This is not going to be technical. Anyone can understand this. I'll try and make it as simple as I can, and if along the way there's something you don't understand, if you have a question, if you have perhaps an unanswered thought, then share that with me and I'll do my best to provide you with the answers. Now, in beginning, what we're trying to do here, more than anything, is establish and get you to a point where you create wealth. But more importantly, creating wealth is different from protecting wealth. And protecting wealth is different from multiplying your wealth. And multiplying your wealth is different from passing on your wealth to other generations. Each and every one of them requires a different level of understanding. And that simply means that the journey you're going to be going through with me over the next 2 weeks will always emphasize on the importance of the commitment to lifelong learning. You must commit. If you want to invest, you've got to commit yourself. It's not something you do passively. You can't become a passive investor and be a passive learner. You have to commit to the discipline of constant and continuous, never-ending improving growth and development. That's a fundamental. If you can't have that, you're going to lose. You are going to lose. So in understanding wealth, we begin by asking the question, well, what is wealth? And why must we start with understanding wealth? When you hear the word, various pictures come to your mind, obviously. You're probably thinking about a bank account with so many zeros, a few commas. You're probably thinking about a financial statement with a lot of assets. Perhaps you have pictures of your mind of the private jets, the luxury lifestyle, the mansions, the yachts, the beautiful cars, the beautiful people. Now, all of those pictures that you have in your mind, in other words, you're thinking about money. Now, that in itself is not an incorrect assumption. It's simply incomplete. Wealth is not just money. You've got to go beyond that. Now, the best way I can describe wealth is to bring you back to the basics. Life is measured in time. Health is derived from life, and therefore health is measured in time. Money is derived, or wealth in this case, is derived from life, and therefore it has to be measured in time. So we measure wealth in money as a function of time. In other words, wealth, according to Buckminster Fuller, which is one of the best definitions I've actually heard, is how long you can survive into the future without having to work and still be able to maintain your chosen lifestyle. Now, that could be as a result of accumulated fortunes, or it could be as a result of income that you're generating. Wealth, in my definition, is simply investment income. In other words, you're wealthy when you arrive at a place where you have income generated from investments that far exceed your expenses, and that allows you to live the lifestyle you want without you having to work, but maybe choosing to work if you want to, for fun, for fulfillment, for joy, for purpose, for significance, but not for necessity. Not because you have to. You work because you want to. And this is important simply because what is simply trying to guide you down the path is that you will need investments. However, you can't just have assets and investments. They must be capable of generating income. The purpose of investing is to create income. Wealth is different from net worth. You see, net worth deals with what you're worth in monetary terms. A good example of how your net worth is different from your wealth is simply, let's assume you live in London and you have perhaps 10 investment properties, and those properties, we call it real estate. It's just pure land, nothing else, no buildings, nothing else, just land. If we assume that that land you have is worth 10 million pounds, and let's assume you have about 10 pieces of land worth 10 million, we say that your net worth, if you have no other source of income, is 10 million. That doesn't mean you're wealthy. It means you have a high net worth. The question that I would ask you is, are you financially free? Or are you financially dependent? You see, if you have 10 million in what I call a frozen asset, in other words, if you choose not to sell these 10 pieces of land or any of them, then it means you must find another means to create income. Maybe you have to go work in a job, go work for money. So we say you're not financially free, you're not wealthy. Now, on the other hand, if you decided for whatever reason that this 10 million, that you were going to sell the pieces of land, and so you had 10 million in cash. If, for example, you had £4,000 as your expenses every month, then what we simply say is that this 10 million divided by 4,000 gives you 2500 months divided by 12 is roughly 200 years. 20 years rather, roughly. 200 years roughly. So, in other words, what you have as a net worth, because you've converted it into the definition of wealth based on money as a function of time, converting it into time, we say that your 10 million pounds, if you spend only 4,000 pounds per month, if that expense has never exceeded 4,000 pounds, that could last you 200 years. So that will last your lifetime. But if you chose not to sell it, then we call that frozen. And net worth that cannot be converted to cash flow to maintain your lifestyle choices, we say does nothing to solve your financial problem. On the other hand, if you had one property in London and it was worth 2 million pounds, and that property generated an income of 5,000 pounds per month, with 4,000 pounds as your expenses, we say that the income from your investment exceeds your expenses. And therefore, we say that you can maintain your chosen lifestyle without having to work. Your number two, he is number one. Number two is financially free. They have an asset. Now, both assets could be appreciated in value. The difference is that number two creates an income, so they can choose not to work and still maintain their lifestyle. The person who is number one has to work for money. Now, 5,000 divided by 4,000 means you have a wealth ratio of what we say 1.25. In other words, you have 25% spare provision to cover your expenses of 4,000 pounds. Now, this is what we call the Welt Ratio. Now, all of what I'm explaining to you, you're going to find it really, really interesting and fascinating as we go along. There's a reason for all of this. You have a Welt Ratio. The key is you want a Welt Ratio greater than 1. If it's greater than 1, then it means you're financially free and you're wealthy. So we start investing by asking questions. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is this. In beginning your investment journey, you must start with a question. The question shouldn't be, what investment vehicle is it? The question should be, what's the purpose for my investment? What is the purpose for the investment? Why am I investing? Because if you understand the why for anything, Nietzsche said, if you understand the why for anything, you can achieve almost any how. If you know the purpose, or if you know your why, then automatically you have the reasons identified. The reasons help you understand the benefits. But with the why known, now you can identify what to do and how to do it. Without purpose, what you'll find is a lot of your investment decisions could be wrong. Now, I'm going to share about 5 or 6 or 7, depending on how I feel, questions you should ask yourself in trying to identify a purpose. Now, I understand if you're starting your investment journey, you probably don't really fully grasp the importance of purpose. So let me share some questions that you should ask yourself. Are you investing, number one, because you need quick cash? Are you stuck? Are you in a difficult position? Are you in debt? Are you investing because you need money immediately, desperately, and you need it regularly? Or maybe you just need a one-off? Are you investing because you need income, or what we call cash flow. Now, I started a few seconds ago, or minutes ago, I talked about an investment option number 2 that created £5,000 per month. That was creating what we call income or cash flow, positive cash flow. Positive cash flow is the key to all business. Every business that doesn't have good positive cash flow will collapse. Every country that doesn't have good cash flow, positive cash flow, will go into depression. In other words, you need money coming in regularly. Now, you know money is going to go out because you have expenses. The question is, how much is coming in? And what is the ratio of what is coming in to what's going out? So are you investing because you need income? But in connection to income, are you also investing because you're trying to supplement your income? Maybe you have a job, and let's say the job pays you a salary that you don't consider to be enough. Or maybe, perhaps you are like I used to be. I used to have my expenses much greater than my income because I had a very poor understanding about money. So I abused money for a number of years because I didn't understand the purpose or the intent. I had no financial understanding or education. So my expenses exceeded my income, and therefore every month I was desperate for more money. I had more month at the end of the money, more days at the end of the month than I had any money left. So are you investing because you want supplementary income? Number 4, are you investing because you're thinking about the future in terms of, for example, your pension and retirement? And that's the word, retirement. Are you thinking about the future? Now, some people want to invest because perhaps they want a safe future. They want some security. They don't trust the pension provision that all the experts are, telling them is the best. They want to make sure they have a backup. Number 5, are you investing because you want to become wealthy or financially free? Now, this is important because, as I'll show you in the next few minutes as I go along, the purpose of your investing decides and helps you select the right investment path, helps you select the right investment strategy. It helps you select the best product for you. Now, these, in my opinion, are some 5 questions you can ask yourself. Now, I just want you to think about it. You might also be in a position whereby perhaps you don't really know, and maybe none of these really interest you. That's okay. For some of us, we have a job, and maybe you hate your job. Maybe you're not working in your true lives. You don't believe your job is your life's calling and passion and purpose. And so maybe you're trying to get out of what we call the rat race. Maybe you've had enough and you just think, I wish I could find some investment that could help me get away from this job so I can be free to go find what I really love to do. Maybe you're also looking to become a full-time investor. Now, this list is not exhaustive, but it gives you some ideas and things to think about. You see, as an investor, think about this. As an investor, this is not a race. This is not like baseball where you have 3 strikes and you're out. No, you can wait. You can choose when to invest. You don't have to be drawn into investing because you think time is ticking. Yes, you might be in a position whereby you're thinking about your age, your family, your future. But I started by saying something, that investing is an intellectual sport. It's not an emotional sport. Most people get into investing because they are reacting to life and they are reacting to external pressure. There is a difference between responding and reacting. If you react, what you're reacting to is in control. If you respond, you're in control. Now, you can only respond by planning in advance. If you don't plan in advance, you're going to react. The chances are, if you react, perhaps you'll be thinking with your emotions. If you respond, you're going to be thinking from your emotions. Two separate ways to live. Good investors respond. They don't react. They do the planning way in advance, so when an opportunity comes, they analyze the opportunity based on their purpose. Now let me give you some examples of why this is important. Let's say you're investing for retirement. I like to make things practical. Let's assume perhaps you earn £2,000 every month, net. Let's also assume that you're going to follow a principle that I'm going to share in more detail later on, and you're going to set aside 10% of what you earn, which is £200 per month. For some people, it's best to take the entire £200 and put in an investment, depending on what they want. So for example, if you have a demand for quick cash, you need money immediately, putting this in a long-term investment portfolio that will be worth so much in so many years doesn't help you deal with what you consider to be a major problem. So for example, if you decided to take £60 from this investment, in other words, that is 30%, leaving you with 70%. If you took 30% and you invested 30%, which is £60 per month, if you put that in an investment scheme that paid an annual return of 10%, if that compounded every month, in 50 years, this £60 per month, or £960 annually, 960, 920, I'm not really sure, it doesn't matter, would have multiplied and compounded, and you would have in excess of roughly about 1.9 million. Something in that region, 1.19, 1.2 million. For 50 years. Now, if you decided after 35 years you wanted to pull out your money, this will be roughly in the region of roughly about maybe 415,000. If you decided to pull this out at year 41, this will probably be roughly about maybe 525,000. Now I want you to watch something now. By year 41, you only have 500,000. By year 50, 10 years later on, you achieve twice the amount. Now that is no mistake, it's simply the principle of compound. It's compounding. As you start, it multiplies slowly, but towards the end of the season or the period, within the last 5 years, it multiplies exponentially. That is you investing for the long term. Now that might be perfect, for example, if you're investing for retirement. If you start working at 20 and you decide you're going to work until perhaps you're 70, or if you start working at 16 and you're going to work until you're 68, for example, it means by the time you retire, you will have built up a nest egg, you would have built up a capital up to, I said 1.19 or 1.2 million. Now if you took this 1.19 or 1.2 million, put it back so that you protected your capital, put in an investment that paid 10%, it would mean every single year you would get £120,000. In other words, every month you get £10,000. £10,000 by retirement, free cash flow, which is what I talked about, wealth, income from investments. £10,000 you'll be earning every month compared to £2,000 you earn your entire life whilst working per month. See the difference? So this investment decision for the long term does two things for you. It deals with retirement so that you have a nest egg. You have a capital principal amount of 1.2 million built up. That 1.2 million is then protected, reinvested, and what it starts to do is lay, like a golden goose, it starts to lay eggs for you. And those eggs is what you call £10,000 per month, and that you can live on. So it then gives you income. Not only is it dealing with your retirement, it will deal with income at a future age. But what it doesn't do for you is it doesn't deal with quick cash. And unfortunately, it doesn't help you supplement your perhaps income from a job in the present, because for this 1.2 million to be available, you must do it consistently every month, and you must apply one of the principles of investment, which is once you create profits, once you create interests, you have to reinvest it. So in other words, the £60 per month, you put it away and you forget about it for the long term. It doesn't deal with some of your needs. So the reason I stress this is simply start by sitting down and asking yourself, what do I really want? Now, there are some instances, as I go along in the journey, you'll be made aware of some of those. There are some instances where you have to start thinking like the wealthy. For example, if a wealthy person who is financially intelligent wants to buy a liability, for example, they might want to buy a new car. Let's say they like the new Aston Martin that has just come out and they want to get, one of those. The financially intelligent will always buy an investment and have the investment pay for the liability. So they're looking for cash flow, but not to supplement their job, because obviously they're financially free. They want cash flow to cover a liability. And they might want that to be available in 2 or 3 years, so they can have the car in the next 2 or 3 years. So the investment they choose will be an investment that can start generating the cash flow needed within 3 years. Obviously, this example I gave you will not work, because you have to wait for 50 years to get the level of income flow from the principal investment. So the first thing you must ask yourself, what's the purpose of my investment? Now, very quickly, once you've established your purpose, what you have to do next is move very quickly, and with that purpose in mind, have it converted. Your purpose must be converted into a vision. Your vision must be converted into a goal or goals. Your goal must be converted into a plan. Once you have your goals, you must assign a timeline for achieving the goal or for achieving the vision. The plan must be converted into a strategy. The strategy is the how-to. The plan is the what to do. The strategy must then be converted into what we call habits. This is the lowest common denominator. The habits create your character. Your character defines the investor. So, what you have is based on what you do, but what you do depends on who you are. I started the session talking about a 3-letter word, you. And this is the reason why I said you're the most important part of the whole equation. The plan is important. The strategy is important. The investor is the most important. You see, your habits define what you do every day. And what you do daily, consistently, determines who you become. The difference between the poor person and the wealthy person is simply one word: habits. Your habits control how you think, your habits control how you feel, your habits control what you do, your habits control your attitude. We all have the same mind. There is only one mind in the universe. There are not 7 billion minds. We have 7 billion people, but one mind. That mind is infinite in supply and infinite in intelligence. The poor person has a different arrangement of the mind. The wealthy person has a different arrangement of the mind. None is good, none is worse than the other. It's all perspective. However, if success is something you're trying to achieve, then you must apply what Paul said. Be not conformed to the world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Go and get your mind back to what it should be. Now get a piece of metal, one magnetic and the other non. The difference between both pieces of metal is simply the arrangement of the molecules and the component parts. If you arrange your mind in such a way that you're thinking about wealth and prosperity, your results will create what you think about. If you have poverty and lack, your results will be poverty and lack. So, at the bottom of everything you're going to do as an investor, you are the lowest common denominator. So we begin with you, because you see, your habits is like a crystal ball. You can sit and watch a crystal ball and you can see the future. If I sat with you in a cafe and I observed your habits over the course of a day, let's say after we've talked and spent some time together, and I spent some time with you and I observed your habits, how you use your time, how you use your money, how you think, how you act, I can predict your future if nothing changes. So we begin with your habits. Your habits is how you execute your strategy. Your strategy is how you execute your plan. Your plan is how you execute your goals. Your goals is how you achieve your vision. Your vision is how you fulfill your purpose. It's a step-by-step pathway. Now, Wallace Watso said that there is a science to getting rich. He says it's an exact science like arithmetic or algebra. If you follow the principles, you can't fail. If you deviate from the principles, then you will be responsible for the outcomes. But creating wealth and investing is like a science. You learn the principles, you learn the rules, you learn the laws, you obey the principles, you obey the rules, you obey the laws, and you will succeed. Now, to create wealth, there is a price that you must pay. The price must be paid in full. The price must be paid in advance. You see, most people want the promise. Very few want to pay the price. Very few are willing to pay the price. If you don't pay the price, you don't deserve the promise. Now, the price must be paid every day. Success is leased. Success is leased. Success and wealth is not owned. You lease it. Every day, through commitment, through consistency, through sacrifice, you renew your lease. If you don't pay the price, you lose. Now, there's the fundamental laws of the universe. To expect to become wealthy without paying a price is a violation of the rules. I'll say that again. To expect to become a great investor or to invest in something that pays you a great return without paying a price is violation of the rules, violation of the laws. Now, I share that with you to make a point. A lot of people, and some people, are looking for the get rich quick, it doesn't work. You have to put the seed in the soil and stand back. Let the gestation period and incubation period run its course. And when it comes out, there's a good harvest. There's a season to sow, there's a season to reap. The season to sow requires seed. The season for harvest requires preparation. But once you put the seed in the soil, you must stand back and let nature do what it does best. Let it multiply your seed. You cannot do both sowing and reaping at the same time. You can't do both in the same season. You must plant the seed and then wait, and the harvest comes. Now I share this to make 3 points. Number one, investing in itself requires patience. Number two, investing requires thinking long term. I understand previously I talked about the purpose of your investing. If you're always thinking about instant gratification of what am I going to get now, wealth will elude you because your decisions will be based on emotions. Investing, number three, requires the awareness that you could lose. So if you're not willing to lose, you better get out of the game, get out of the race, because the race are not for the weak-hearted. You might lose. As a matter of fact, you should expect to lose. Now, part of that is not simply to say things might go wrong and you're wishing upon yourself loss. No, because you are the lowest common denominator, the level of your success in investing will seldom exceed the level of your wisdom. So, this is the key. Losses generally come from a lack of wisdom. It means there was something you just didn't know. You didn't consult the right people. You took decisions perhaps too quickly, or in some cases, you did everything that was right, and the market, for some reason, reacted negatively. You know, a farmer can plant seed in the soil, and he's a good farmer. The soil is good. And just before harvest time, the rain comes. And the rain can, fall so heavily and drown all of the seeds. And he has no harvest. So there are times when external events that you cannot control affect your harvest. But the point I want to make is this. You're the link. You are the link. You must study. And this is the reason why I've been talking about study. This word is going to come up over the next 2 weeks, to the point where I'll become very redundant. But I'm going to keep hammering this word in, because until you understand that this is a gift, this is how you water the seed. Now, Warren Buffett is what I would imagine at this point in time, and most people would agree with me, is the most successful investor we've had of our time, of the 21st century at least. And he started his investment journey, and he would read about 500 pages. He started from 250 every day. He would sit down and read about 250 pages of content and knowledge to improve his ability to be a good investor. Today, he still spends 85% of his time studying. Now, he's worth about $75 billion. So, automatically you can see that there's a ratio here, ratio of education to how much time he spends studying. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you apply the same 85%, you get the same results. All I'm simply saying is that there's a price for studying and there's a promise. If you do it intelligently, the promise is always worth the price, and even worth more. Now, Once you've broken down your purpose down to your daily habits, which is what you must do every day, and you start to develop the sense of study and awareness and increasing your understanding, we're now ready to take another leap into the next stage. The next stage we're going to talk about is, how do you begin? There's a formula for wealth, a simple formula. Similarly, there's a formula for poverty. Now let me illustrate with this. This is a glass of water. We call it H2O. 2 parts of hydrogen mixed with 1 part of oxygen. You mix it in the right way, you produce a compound. The compound is colorless, it's odorless. Now, if I drink it, it will nourish me. H2O. Now, if I change the component parts of this compound, let's say, for example, I decide to mix 2 parts of hydrogen with 2 parts of oxygen. Now, what I've created now is a different compound. It's called H2O2. We call it hydrogen peroxide. It's colorless, just like water. It's odorless, just like water. But if I drink it, it will kill me. You see, if you change the component parts, you change the outcomes. In the same way, wealth comes as an equation. The equation is very simple. But to understand the equation, we have to be balanced in our views. Therefore, we must look at the equation for poverty. ESS. I share both because every coin has 3 sides. You have the heads, you have the tail. In other words, one side representing poverty, one representing wealth. But you also have the edge. You see, for a long time I lived on this side. And all I could see was one side of the coin. Most people can only see one side of the coin. In the 1900s or way beyond that, much way beyond that, it was widely accepted that the world was flat. That if you walk to the edge of the world, of Earth, you will fall off. And some great explorers said, no, we don't believe that the world is flat. We think that the world is round. They had a different perspective. They said, we're going to take the challenge. We're going to go sailing. We're going to go on this adventure. And they journeyed. And they found that if you walked and kept walking, you arrived back where you started. And therefore we learned that the world was indeed round. It's all a matter of where you stand. That's how you see the world. You always see the world based on your perspective. If you're going to create wealth, you must have the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. In other words, you've got to be emotionless. And therefore, you have to stand on the edge so you can look down to one side and look down to the other side. And that is the reason why I'm sharing both equations. I'm not suggesting one is right and one is wrong. It's all a matter of perspective. One person sees the same glass that I was holding and they say it's half empty. Another person says it's half full. It's a matter of perspective. For so many years, I applied the principle of poverty. I want to show you how you begin that journey towards investing and what you must start with and what you must understand. Most people think about wealth and investing and they think it has to do with what they earn. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the first letters, E. The E represents earnings. Now, 97% of the population will work for money. 3% of the population have money work for them. The 3% are the wealthy, the rich. The 97% is the rest of the population. Poor people earn, but the first thing they do is they spend. They spend. As soon as they earn, they spend first. And then whatever they have left, they save. And for that reason, they stay poor. Now, this is not an attack on anyone, because I've lived in poverty for so long, I know what it feels like. I think I'm very good and I'm in a great position to talk about it because I've tried both sides of the coin, and I can tell you that one of them is much better than the other. But I found in my journey, I struggled and I was in debt for so long for one reason. After I earned, the first thing I did was spend. The problem was I had more expenses than my income. I had no financial understanding, so I spent everything I earned. Therefore, I couldn't even save. So for so many years, my financial position never changed. And I used to always say, if I had more money, then I would invest. If I had more money, then I could save more so I can invest. The problem is not what you earn. The problem is what do you do with what you earn. Now, I started a few minutes ago and I gave you an example. I said, if you earn £2,000 net per month, and all you did was set aside £60 per month. In other words, invest £920 per year. If you did this for 50 years consistently, you would have 1.2 million, between 1.19 and 1.2 million in 50 years. That 1.2 million, if invested, obviously this being a 10% annual return, if you reinvest this 1.2 million to protect your principal amount in the same investment that paid 10%, then you would have £120,000 per year or £10,000 per month, demonstrating that at the end of your working life, you can be earning more in income than you earned all of your life. It's all a matter of what you do with what you earn. Now, £60 of what you have is roughly you setting aside 30% of the 10% you would have set aside for investing. So let's say £2,000 per month. If you set aside 10%, which would have been 200, and you took 30% of that 200, £60, that would create a fortune for you in your lifetime. Let's reverse it and say, what if all you earned was £600 per month? I want to prove to you that you can earn less than minimum wage and still earn a lot of money over the course of your life and live a really remarkable life. £600 per month, if you invested 10% of that in an investment that paid a rate of return of 10%, it would be the same as investing £60 per month. In 50 years, you'd have 1.2 million. And this will pay you £10,000 at the end of the 50 years compared to the £600 you earn per month. So you see, it has very little to do with what you earn. It has everything to do with your habits. What do you do after you earn? I had to change my habits to change my life. To invest, you're going to have to change your habits because investing requires consistency. You can't just, one day you invest, the next day you don't, the next month you do, the next month you don't. It requires consistency. Consistency. The wealthy, on the other hand, apply a different principle. They earn, the amount is the same. But the first thing they do is they invest. And once they're done investing, now they can spend. But when they spend with a plan in mind. A plan to create an extra surplus so that they can reinvest. But the key here is, what do you do after you've earned? It's not how much money you earn, it's how much money you keep for investing and how diligently you do that. The key to creating a great life as an investor is this. Number one, you must discipline yourself to live on less than you earn. Number one, you must live on less than you earn. Less than you earn. Number two, you must discipline yourself to pay yourself first. Now, I talk about this as number two, but in principle, that's the first thing you do. You pay yourself first by investing. Number three, when you've invested, you must do it consistently. You must do it with focus. You must do it automatically so that there is no reason to default. But more than anything, you must discipline yourself to reinvest the returns. So, a seed can become a tree, a beautiful orchid of trees. However, you've got to plant the seed, but the watering and the growth of the seed comes from taking the returns you generate and reinvest it. So you must reinvest. Now, this is the reason why I asked the question at the start, what's the purpose? Because if your original purpose is you need income to supplement perhaps a job, what you find is perhaps if you have £200 per month coming from your investments, if you're £200 short every month from your job, then the temptation to reinvest will be something that you can't, you'll be tempted to spend it. To reinvest it becomes very difficult because you need money. So understanding why you're investing is key. But the truth is, if you're going to create wealth, if you can't discipline yourself to reinvest, then what you do here is you're eliminating the principle of compounding. Now, Albert Einstein said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. If you take away the reinvesting of the returns, you take away compounding. It's no different from what we call simple interest. It does nothing. You can't get wealthy quick enough. Now, once you've reinvested, number four should actually come before number three, so I'm not going in any particular order. In investing, you must invest smartly and under the counsel of wise people. In other words, I made a statement that said, expect to lose. Because when you start your journey, the mistake many of us have is we're trying to run this race alone. We're trying to create our ideal future using our mind and our brain alone. If you try to do that, you might find that your wisdom is limited, and so you make mistakes. So the key to number four is always seek counsel, always seek the advice, follow the recommendations of great people, follow good advice. Don't trust in your understanding alone. Leverage other people's experiences so that you can maximize time. Number five, living on less than you earn, you're paying yourself first, you've invested it, you're reinvesting, you've invested on the good counsel. Number 5 is where the temptation comes in. I would say go for safe returns. Go for safe returns. In other words, don't be lured by investment deals that promise you investment returns that sometimes are too good to be true. Now, sometimes they do work. The problem is, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, high returns means higher risk. The key to wealth is consistency in above average returns. Now, you notice I've been using 10%, and if you can achieve between 10 and 12%, between 10, 12 or 15%, that's perfect. But anything above 10% is great. I haven't talked about 22% and 25%, but because the risk in many of those cases is much bigger. Now, if you're roughly about 50 years, for example, at 50 years, you cannot afford to take high risks because you're approaching perhaps your retirement age. You don't have enough time to make back all of what you may lose. If you're 22, you still have more time. Now, I started when I said if you were earning £2,000. The reason I broke down the 10%, which was £200 per month, the reason I broke it down into £60 invested was because I was applying what I call a 30-70 ratio. I was going to put 30% in a long-term investment scheme and then reassign the 70% smartly. This brings me to number 6. After you've invested for safe returns, you must apply what we call asset allocation. In other words, don't put all of your eggs in one basket, especially if you're beginning your investment journey. You haven't developed the knowledge and the understanding to hedge the basket. Now, that's what smart people do. They put everything in one basket, they focus because they understand, and then they protect the basket. In your case, you may have to start by asset allocation. I'm not talking about diversification, I'm talking about asset allocation. 2 different things. Now, once you've gone through these steps, now you're ready to begin the journey. How do you begin the journey? The journey begins with the understanding that there are, in principle, 4 major investment opportunities and vehicles you can choose. Number 1 is a business. You can set up, you can buy a business. Number 2 is what we call, sometimes some people say real estate. Some people say property investing. It's important you know the difference between both. In parts of New York, for example, in the States, real estate would include not just the building itself, it could also include the air rights to a building. In some other parts of the world, it's simply called property because they focus on just the structure or the land. You can also invest in what we call commodities. Gold, silver, oil, farm produce. You can also invest in what we call paper assets. Bonds, stocks, funds. These are the vehicles you need. Now, this is important. Why? Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. If you know where you are, if you know where you're trying to get to, and if you move in the direction of your destination progressively, that's success. You know your location, you know your destination, and you're traveling in that direction. So if you were going to travel from London to Paris, for example, there are many ways to get to Paris. There isn't one way. You can fly. It'll take you about, from London, maybe about an hour, 25 minutes, 26 minutes to get to Paris. You can always use the Euro train. You can get there in an hour, 30 minutes. You can drive. If you drive, it'll take you, who knows, maybe 8 to 9 hours. You can choose to ride a bicycle, might take you 24 hours. You can choose to walk, might take you about 3 days. Each of those options will get you to Paris. The question is, how quickly do you get to Paris? And in what condition do you get to Paris? Now, the reason most people stay poor is most people are ignoring leverage. And all of these investment vehicles provide you with some level of leverage. People are trying to earn their way to wealth through what we call hard work. The problem is, at the end of their 50-year working life, they've sacrificed all of their health to achieve wealth. And when they have the wealth, they don't have the health. So now they have to spend the wealth to gain back health. Now, if I walk to Paris, I don't think I would have the strength to visit the Eiffel Tower. I'll be too exhausted. I can simply allow someone else to do the flying, the plane, or the train, and I can sit down quietly and get there at the designated time. The point I'm making is this: all of the various investment vehicles can achieve any goal. There's no such thing as an unrealistic goal or vision. What you have is an unrealistic deadline. So depending on the vehicle you choose, it will determine how quickly you achieve your destination. I'm going to be sharing with you over the next few days some of what I know in relation to choosing the right vehicle. I'll share with you the ones that have worked for me. But here is the point. Don't trust any advice you get. Verify, 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 verify. No one has all the answers. The advice might be right, but not right for you. Because no one knows your dreams, no one knows your goals like you do. And if things go wrong, you're going to pay the price. So increase your education so that you can take the information I've shared with you so far, you can get some more information from other sources, then you can sit down, you can go through each and every one of them and select carefully what you want and make for yourself a beautiful cocktail of great ideas. Then you can apply into your life. But don't make the mistake that a lot of people make where they delegate the responsibility to others. Now, I hope that's been very useful. That's all I'm going to share with you today in part 1. Allow me to wish you the best of luck. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. God bless.